If everybody would please take your seats and join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. It's on. God, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We welcome you, and I'm going to find out what's happening with my mic here. Oh, stand on the X, so the pressure. Okay, but I need my notes. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. We're so glad to be here for the 10th returning Steps Come Alive in Boise, Idaho. Welcome back. Myself and the committee are so pleased to welcome you all to the revival of this event this evening. Tonight, we will begin with a talk from 7 to 8:30 from our guest speaker, Father Tom W. of Oakland, California. Tom came into Al-Anon about 10 years after being sober for about 10 years because he was teaching at the time and the kids were driving him crazy. Tonight, Tom is going to talk to us a bit about the family disease of alcoholism and the recovery from it in the Al-Anon program, as well as working an Al-Anon program as a dual program member of any other recovery program. Tomorrow, Father Tom will talk to us in depth about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. These 12 steps are the same 12 steps that are worked in Al-Anon, AA, and various other 12-step fellowships worldwide. The workshop will have information for whatever 12-step program you are working. Tom, I'm going to turn the evening over to you now.
My name is Tom, and I need 100,000 Al-Anon meetings. And I'm happy to discuss some Al-Anon stuff with you this evening. And tomorrow, more focused on AA and the 12 steps. The way I've been raised in my own recovery is the various 12-step programs are friends and companions and allies, not the opposition or the enemy. Sometimes I've met AA people who think AA is the true church, and then varying degrees of hostility and hellfire for everybody else. And it's a bad way to live. I got sober in 1976, which was during the brief Ford presidency. You can Google it and look it up if you like. And at that time, the understanding was you were a member of one program or the other program, and there wasn't a lot of mixing. And I think it took some time and some experience for people to realize after 10 or 20 or 30 years in one program, you might need help. It's time to deal with the weight. It's time to deal with the gambling. It's time to deal with the rage. I speak at AA stuff regularly, and also Al-Anon stuff. I tell people I'm bilingual. I can talk both languages. And I was at a meeting in Marin County, which is San Francisco, Alameda County, Oakland, Berkeley, and then Marin is over there. And they're a little odd. And we all are a little nervous in Marin County for 100 very good reasons. Anyway, I was at a meeting and I mentioned I was sober and things, and I talked about alcoholism stuff. And then I mentioned that when I was about 10 years sober, I started going to Al-Anon because I did not want to be a sober person who was shooting people. And I think when you're telling your story, you get to tell your story, you know. I'm not going to focus on the Al-Anon crazy or anything else, but I mean, AA meeting speak anyway. At the end of the meeting, this lady came up to me and she said, I'm 7 years sober and I hate everybody. Should I start going to Al-Anon? And I said, hold out as long as you can. Don't rush your recovery, you know. I think it's Thomas Aquinas in the 1200s, very bright fellow, and one of his quotations is, don't run faster than God's grace. And some of us, we know we need a huge amount of help and we want all of it today. And that's a little perfectionistic and a little impatient. And so, with our life expectancy so much longer, some of us have the opportunity of, in the course of a lifetime, of being active in more than one program. So that's my point of view, but I'm right. So I was a high school teacher. I'm also clergy. I mean, I'm a Catholic priest. I'm a member of the Jesuit community, and we've been around for about 500 years. We had a couple of guys in Brophy, in Boise a few years ago, but schools and retreat houses and high schools, we do all kinds of things like that, and we get involved in other stuff. The Franciscans and the Dominicans are around for about 1,000 years, and the Benedictines for about 1,500 years. And it takes about 1,500 years to work out kinks, you know, and discover a need for traditions and safety and, you know, all those things that we're given with the 12 traditions that help keep us safe and sane. I was talking to someone, he wanted information on the Jesuits, and it's a great big topic. But he's a bit of a conspiracy person, so he's pretty sure there's aliens and winged lizards and Martians. And I said, well, if you want to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, the Masons run everything. The Jews run the Masons. And the Jesuits run the Jews, if you want to go there. But anyway, outside topics. So let me share a little bit about my Al-Anon experience as someone who had some recovery. But it is, one of the images that's used is an onion, you know, and you peel off layer after layer, and there's still more onion there. And recovery is a lot like that. We can get down to what are even sometimes called core issues. We can work really hard at our recovery and be very busy all the time with our recovery. And I don't know why I'm tired all the time. And my sponsor would say, he was 52 years sober when he died. Last December, 84 years old, and he would say this to younger people in meetings. He would say, don't try harder. Resist less. Because I've resisted recovery. I've had things suggested to me that would help, and I wasn't in that much pain. Thank you very much. Let's talk again next year. Don't try harder, resist less. And a lot of recovery, I mean, there surely is footwork and there's tools and there's work to do. I mean, absolutely. But pacing is important, timing is important, real things take time. I was at a meeting, I was maybe 4 or 5 years sober. I was at a meeting in the Midwest, and a person there was talking and said that your first year of recovery is about physical things. And your second year of recovery is about emotional things. And your third year of recovery is about spiritual things. Then you die? I, you know? Now, at 4 years sober, that seemed pretty good. Okay, I could buy that. But now, with a little bit longer time, I think the first 15 years are physical. And the second 15 are emotional. And the third set of 15 talks about some pretty good spiritual principles. So, again, don't rush this. The healing process takes time. And God is at work. And this is stuff we can receive. My sponsor got dementia, probably 10 years ago, and we started noticing him repeating himself, telling the same joke 3 times in 20 minutes, and a few other things. And so we took him his sister took him to a doctor, and they took a picture of his brain, and the short-term memory was evaporating. And he went to an AA meeting, and he told the group, these are LA people, who are as special as those Marin County people, just so you know. And he said, I'm Terry, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm losing my mind. And they all laughed. Ha, ha, ha. He says, I have a picture. And he was okay. He was able to do a lot of things for the first 7 years of the dementia. And then it got worse, and then it got worse, and then much worse. And so I was talking to him about aging, which if you're lucky, you get to do. And I just turned 76, so I'm paying big attention to these numbers. And he listened, and I said, I get tired more quickly. I bounce back more slowly. I'm going to stop doing some of the things I've been involved in. I'm letting go of some stuff. And then I told him half a dozen things I was going to be letting go of. And he listened. And then he said, some things we let go of. Some things are taken away. The state of California had removed his driver's license about 6 months before. And he was not happy about it. When he said, some things are taken away, you could feel that little bit of, And I loved him for that. He's very real. Al-Anon. So I was teaching kids, and kids are tough. I taught high school kids. And my understanding is, and I taught them drinking. I was 3 years heavy drinking in middle stage alcoholism as I taught kids in my 20s, and then I come back sober now in my early 30s, and it was much more difficult to teach kids sober. You have instant relief, I remember you're just surrounded by Philistines, and these awful children. And you can get home and get a glass of bourbon and swallow it in 3 gulps, and you're instantly better. Sober, it's different. I was at a meeting full of young people, this is years ago, and this one young woman said, the program's not like heroin. It doesn't work right away. Takes some time. So I go back in, I'm full of fear, I'm full of anxiety, I have no self-confidence at all. Without alcohol, I notice my vulnerabilities and my things that were very out of balance. And a huge shock to me was that I was afraid of my students. I didn't know that. But I was sedated every day, so of course I didn't know that. But, these rooms full of young people, and I had to learn how to deal with the fear, and I was exhausted, and I was yelling at kids. I remember yelling at a 16-year-old person about a band called Devo. You older people can Google Devo, and it was the rage. And it's awful. It's just crap. And this kid thought it was Mozart, and I was explaining to him how wrong he was at the top of my voice. So I'm getting myself into those situations. The cranky old guy. And I did a weekend retreat with a group of people out in San Bernardino. And Saturday night there was a meeting. AA and Al-Anon met together, and the AAs allowed the Al-Anons to talk. You know, sometimes they don't, you know, you can. And the man was the Al-Anon, his wife was the alcoholic, and I'm busy doing stuff because that's what I do. And I heard this man say, in Al-Anon, I learn how to live with a crazy person and not go crazy. And I heard that. Because I felt crazy. I felt angry all the time. I felt confrontational all the time. I was out of proportion in many, many ways. And I was becoming a liability. So I talked to my sponsor about it, and he said, let's give this a try. So I went to an Al-Anon meeting on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, and mostly women. There were a couple of men. We sat in the back. The woman who was the chair of the Al-Anon group had been secretary for 50 or 70 years. You know how those positions of service you can just hold on to. And it was an Al-Anon meeting, so they read all kinds of stuff. Will someone please read this? And will someone please read? And it goes on and on and on. And then when they finished with all that, the meeting kicked in, and the format was, if you had a problem, you presented it to Her Majesty, and she would solve it for you. Now, that's not Al-Anon, right? I mean, that is compulsive advice giving. That's North Korea. That's a lot of things. But the way it works in Al-Anon, in case they haven't told you this yet, is if someone asks for direction or suggestions, the deal is to share your own experience. You don't tell them what to do with theirs. You share your own experience, and if you don't have the experience, you refer them to someone else. I think it's a great way to do things, and I follow it, I'd say, 80% of the time, which I think is pretty good. I sponsor some people, and some have kids. I don't have kids. I do not counsel people on kids. I've taught them, and I've seen them in stores. But I haven't lived with the little guys. See, so it's a different deal. Also, in relationship stuff, I mean, I'm not a participant, and although I've seen many movies about you people, I don't tell people how to get along. One fellow, you know, wife and kids and wife and kids and wife and kids. And what the advice I give him, in addition to talk to people with kids and people who are married, I say, you should get more sleep. If I were you, I'd want a lot more sleep. I find sleep very helpful in dealing with stressful situations. So I went to that meeting for a while, and then I went to another meeting where they actually followed traditions and had rotating leadership. And then I left teaching kids. Time to go. And I did something else in West Oakland, and I stopped going to Al-Anon until I needed Al-Anon again, because I was doing social work. And I was surrounded by adults in crises. And you know how people have drinking dreams? Well, they do. I mean, you might not know that, but people do have drinking dreams. I have Al-Anon dreams, where literally I am flying around town in a cape, and I'm rescuing people in trouble. You know, it's like Superman or Wonder Woman or, you know, and I wake up, I think they're hilarious, but I still have those, you know, where I just can't wait to fix you. Wake up in a cold sweat. So then, probably 10, 12, 13 years sober, it was time to deal with mom and dad. And there's alcoholism in the family. And it was time to talk about it. I saw a therapist. I saw a woman who was a psychiatrist. And she ran the methadone clinic in Berkeley, which means she was not a romantic, you know? And I saw her for almost 2 years. And I lay on the couch. It was very Freudian. It was hilarious. You know, this is like a bad movie. And there I am free associating. And it was with her that I said for the first time that my father was an alcoholic. And I did not feel liberated. I did not feel free. I felt shame. I can be an alcoholic. My oldest brother can be an alcoholic. My cousin, but not my dad. I had some shame and some embarrassment and some self-loathing to deal with that I hadn't been able to get around to yet. And I did a couple of very intense years work with adult children of alcoholics group who, where I live, are not known for happy. There's a lot of archaeology that goes on there. And I think some archaeology is very, very useful. Too much for me was paralyzing. So I got some perspective and some ideas and some kindness, and then I needed a lighter place, and I moved more into Al-Anon, where it was a lighter place. Learning about alcoholism, it's an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. They're allergic and they're obsessed. I was leading a group, this was in New York, upstate. Women, mostly Al-Anon, and I talk about the few things I know about. And then I was doing some one-on-one conversations, and this lady came to see me, and she said, her opening words to me on Saturday morning were, "If I knew you were an alcoholic, I never would have come." Well, I've been to Al-Anon for a while, and I know act, don't react. Act, don't react. Act, don't react. So I said, "What's that about?" Well, her husband was an alcoholic, and he ruined her life and the lives of their children, and he ruined their lives and the lives of the children, and he ruined her life and the lives of the children. So I'm a college graduate. I figure this is a brand new person to Al-Anon. She needs some information, you know? I mean, this is... And I said, "So how long have you been coming to meetings?" And she said, 10 years. Act, don't react. Act, don't react. Act, don't react. And if I had reacted, I would have said, "Have you heard nothing?" That's the teacher's voice. It's very effective. But I didn't, and I told, you know, all of a sudden, first I had rage, and I wanted to punish her and make her cry because she's stupid. First reaction. Right. Not helpful. And then in Narcotics Anonymous, which is a program that really saves lives, they say first thought wrong. Keep that in mind, Al-Anons. First thought wrong. And I was able to let those thoughts not be spoken And then I was able to tell her, if you need to go home, you're free to do that. You don't have to stay. You've got choices. But you're welcome to stay. And she stayed for the whole weekend, and she seemed to cheer up a little bit, but you got to learn about the disease. The woman who mentored me a lot in Al-Anon is a woman from Texas named Blanche. Her first husband was Davenport, so Blanche D. And then they separated, and she married Bob Miller, Blanche M. or Blanche D.M. It comes up in different. She died in 2000. She's been gone a long time. But she did a lot of speaking, and she talked about needing to learn about the disease and needing to learn about the recovery. Presume nothing. Presume nothing. And it's that ongoing education. I brought some this is high school teacher handouts. Mimeograph machines, I remember those, and stencils, I remember those. So I'm going to just refer to this sheet for a little bit and then put it out, and if you want a copy, take it home. But this is learning about the disease, an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. Blanche said when she grew up in northern Florida, she learned some things that were just not true. One was she was taught God helps those who help themselves. And she said that's not true. God helps those who ask. And when I remember that, I remember to ask. I don't always remember that one. And then she was taught what you don't know can't hurt you. And she said, what I did not know about alcoholism almost killed 4 people. There's a book by a guy named William White. It is called Slaying the Dragon: The History of Addiction Treatment and Recovery in America. It's a textbook. It's not a novel. It goes all the way back to 1776, when Dr. Benjamin Rush, hanging out with George Washington at Valley Forge, sees all these drunk sailors and soldiers, and Dr. Rush in his diary says, I wonder if this is a disease. It goes all the way back to him, to more contemporary things. And one of the big influencers in the early program of recovery was a psychiatrist named Dr. Harry Tiebout. He was Bill Wilson's psychiatrist when Bill was dying of depression, sober 10, 12 years. And here's what Dr. Tiebout says about the malady. According to Dr. Harry Tiebout, a psychiatrist and an early friend of AA, alcoholics are characterized by, and here's the quote, egocentricity, a rebellion against restrictions, a search for pleasure, a demand for special consideration. Do you know anyone like this? We're not done. A peculiar twisted logic. And finally, marked irresponsibility and immaturity. We should make a song out of that, you know. I don't know the melody, but some of you are musical. Work on that. Egocentricity, a rebellion against restrictions, a search for pleasure, a demand for special consideration, a peculiar twisted logic, and finally, marked irresponsibility and immaturity. That's the quote. Add alcohol, and persons do not grow or develop. That's why so many, if you started drinking regularly at 15, 16, 17 years old, You get sober when you're 55, but you're still 15, 16, and 17 years old. And not a mature 15, 16, or 17 years old. The 12 steps give the footwork and direction to help alcoholics grow up emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. An awful lot of that business of doing an inventory. What have you been doing for the last 20 years? And what's your part in it? Look at your things out of proportion, out of whack, out of, clean up your mess. And when you're wrong, promptly admit it. And then clean up your mess again. I think my first 10 years sober, I was wrong, 5 or 6 times. And now I find it's all the time. I mishear things, I misread things, I misplace things. It's really very sad and tragic. And then I have to admit it. So here's one of they mentioned this thing here of a rebellion against restriction. Here's one of my problems. Please don't tell anyone. I hate authority figures. I want them to like me and write me big checks. But I hate them. And whenever I'm around them, I get highly anxious. What I try to do, because I'm an alcoholic, is seduce them with charm. But I hate them. When I was my first meeting with Dr. Geraldine Wasserman Fink, the woman who ran the methadone clinic in Berkeley, I wanted to tell her all about me now that I was in recovery. And it was time to do a little mom and dad work, but it's a 50-minute hour, and I spent 47 minutes talking about me and alcoholism and things and stuff and so forth and onward. And then in the last 2 minutes, I said, "Doctor, do you have any questions for me?" And she said, "Just one." And I said, "Yes." She said, "Are you always this charming?" And I said, "Excuse me." She said, "Charm, very alcoholic. You don't have to do that here. See you Tuesday." I mean, so she was very good for me for our conversation. She really, really helped. But I still have it. I'm a member of a community, and we have bosses and leaders and so forth. And we are having a deal. His Majesty the King was coming to visit us, and he comes once a year. And there were some things that I wanted done, and I was afraid that they might not happen. Is that vague enough? But I was ready to charm, bamboozle, finagle, lie, to get what would be for the greater good, of course. And days and days and days before, I was so anxious, and I was having these conversations with him over again, and I was making things up in my head, and I was doing this and I was doing that. And I had to talk to someone in the program about this, and they reminded me that God helps those who ask, and telling the truth is a pretty good program of recovery. So I decided to do that instead. And we had our meeting, and it didn't look like it was going to work out. And then a couple weeks passed, and we had another meeting, and things worked out just fine. And as we were ending our conversation, where my side won, I thought I'd tell him, because he's new on the job. He should know me. I said, "I just want you to know that I was willing to lie to you to get my way." So that's who you're dealing with, and I'm sure we'll speak a little more freely now that we know each other a little better. He laughed nervously. Al-Anon. So here's another problem with Al-Anon. And by the way, this page of Dr. Tebow, I'll leave out here, and you can pick a copy up and share it if you like. If you don't want one, don't worry about it. In Alcoholics Anonymous, there are some very concrete things you do for your recovery. And there are alcoholics who think they have recovered when they stop peeing on themselves. I think I'm ready to sponsor. You know, I haven't peed on myself now in quite some time. Al-Anon's tougher. And I didn't know how to explain this. I trying to talk about what are you talking about? And the image that came to me not long ago was, for me, it was like trying to grab smoke. You know, I was hear words and half an idea, and I'd grab for it, and it just... So that woman, Blanche, D.M., from West Texas, she said on a cassette tape that I listened to 100 times, in Al-Anon, we learn how to keep our sails out of other people's wind. And I wrote that down. That's exactly, there's so much wind blowing. And I used to feel alive when the sails were full. But a lot of that wind is none of my business. I want to keep my sails out of other people's wind. I used to love getting mixed up in your stuff. It was adrenaline. It was excitement. It was thrills. And as a young person, that is as addictive as anything else they're selling on the block. And now what I find with adrenaline and stuff like that is it's exhausting. I wear out much more quickly. And I probably, when I hit my 60s, my prayer became, I want a life without trauma and without drama. That's my goal. Instead of, I have an interesting life because I'm full of trauma and drama, and these are all my friends, and let's go to the hospital now. It's not fun. It's not fun. Oh, my goodness. So, and Blanche said a few other things. As kids, you know, most families have stuff. Some families have a lot of stuff. And kids, you're trying to figure things out and control mom and dad, and you're pretty sure you're doing that when you're 4. And then you find you may have a couple of skills, and so you run with those. You get approval for those, and you might be a smart little kid. That was me. So smart stuff, I did a lot of that. You might be athletic, and that you do a lot of that. You might be good at this. You do a lot of that, and you start developing your personality, and you start developing a whole bunch of defense mechanisms. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. This is a perfectly good thing. This is called growing up and making mistakes and finding stuff out. The problem for many of us is what worked as defense mechanisms when we were kids become prisons when we're adults. We have built a wall around ourselves, and we don't know how to get out of. I think the language in the program is self-constructed prisons. And you have to learn new skills. Some of us didn't have to learn any skills at all because we were cute or handsome or pretty. And that'll go a long way until it doesn't go anymore. You know? Or funny. I did that one a lot too. And I found this is as a young adult working in a group with other people in committees and planning stuff and perhaps in an office, if tension developed and an argument started, which I'm terrified of, I'd get funny. and I'd make everybody laugh, and I'd get funny, and I'd make everybody laugh. And within a few months, everybody didn't like me. I'm so funny, what's the problem? I would not allow an honest conversation in the group. And I've had to, this is all, program and reflection and talking to people. When I'm in a situation and I think of something hilarious to say to the person next to me, it usually means I'm uncomfortable. There's something going on. Why don't you just let yourself be uncomfortable? So a fair amount of my Perfect Al-Anon program is for me just to keep my big mouth shut. Especially when I'm amusing, or think I'm being amusing, or entertaining, or like, because it can help, like tonight. I know I have a way of doing this, and I can make people laugh about some terrifying things. But I think this is sharing information and being vulnerable with you instead of refusing anything to happen that's real. And I had to learn how to do that. A lot of the humor I used for a long time was sarcasm, which is not funny. I don't find it funny at all anymore, and I can still do it. Also, I can be caught by surprise, and that's never good. First thought wrong. There was a group, it's called the Sarah Club, not Sierra, Sarah Club, and they are mostly older, nice Catholic people who try to be supportive to priests, which I'm in favor of. And somehow they got my name, and they have like lunch once a month and chicken salad, and they get some priests to go and give a talk about stuff. So I'd been a priest for 20 or 25 years, and someone got my name. Oy. So I go to this group of nice people, nice older people, chicken salad, and they ask me to, what do I do? So I talked about being a high school person, and I've taught English in Southeast Asia, I've taught in Vietnam, I've taught in Thailand, I've taught in Myanmar, I've taught in mainland China. I mean, I've done all kinds of things, and then I mentioned that I was also an alcoholic in recovery, and I get to spend a lot of time with people in recovery, talk over. Any questions? You're an alcoholic. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic. How old were you when you started drinking? Oh. I really started drinking and smoking as soon as I could. That's what's true. But 15, I guess. 15. The question comes from a woman of a certain age. 15, and she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself." I was caught completely by surprise. And my first thought, I told her, "You are too old to be that stupid." Now see, once the bell is rung, and as I heard myself say it, restraint of pen and tongue, and I just, oh man, this is so off. So I apologized, and I apologized, and I was embarrassed, and I apologized, and when things ended, I apologized again. And she said, "You don't have to tell me about alcoholics. I was married to 3 of them." So this is someone who needed 100,000 Al-Anon meetings to kind of cheer up, But being prudence, that using speech to bring people together, not to force people apart. Boy, that's wisdom. That's a wisdom thing. And I want to work on that. I want to be better at that. Al-Anon. We come from all over, and I heard this at a meeting, and I ran with it a little bit, again, explaining alcoholism, because people don't get it. My mom was surrounded by alcoholics. She never got it. Worry is love, you know? Worry, worry, worry. I love you so much. Worry, worry, worry. Oi. So I heard this. Alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. See? When I heard the story, they didn't say dancing, they said dating. And they didn't say dating. But you get the idea. You're on the receiving end, you know, and you're not done till the gorilla's done. Now, I think it's a great image, and what you explain to alcoholics is if you're clean and sober today, get out of the cage. I mean, the gorilla's taking a nap or is distracted. Get out of the cage. And don't go back into the cage even when the gorilla starts humming your song, which it does. Oh, I'll never go back there. It's so disgusting. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. It was so tragic. Everyone was so angry at me. And where were all those goats from? I just don't know. But you know, it's 3 months or 6 months or a year, and you get a little edgy, and the moon is full, and you hear music. Maybe one more dance, you know. Maybe one more. And then you get killed. One of my pals in Las Vegas says he doesn't want to dance with the gorilla anymore. He wants to just pet it a little bit every so often. Yeah. Stay out of the cage. Now, we who love alcoholics, they're cute and they're fun, at least for a while. You know, we who love alcoholics and addicts, we visit the zoo a lot. And you go in and you see lions and tigers and bears. I mean, all these lovely things. Snakes. Oh, my goodness, snakes. And then you go by the gorilla cage. And you see the one you love with the gorilla. Now, it might be your spouse. That's early Al-Anon. My spouse, specifically my male spouse for ever so many, is dancing with the gorilla. There must be something I can do. 1939, the movie of the year was Lost Weekend, which is a novel by a guy named Jackson, I think. And it's a bender, it's a Ray Milland plays the drunk and his girlfriend and they leave him and there's a bottle and he does horrible things and he goes to bars and he's disgusting and he's crazy and insane. It's a scary movie. Comes back, and in the movie, Jane Wyman, who plays his wife, and he fall in love and they have perfect lives. The love of a good woman will save a bad man. Now that movie probably caused 10 million unhappy marriages throughout North America. It's not how the book ends. But Hollywood needs a smile. But marrying alcoholics, it exhausts you, it wears you out, it can be terrifying. I have never wanted to marry an alcoholic, just so you know. So that's one group that looks into the cage. The other group, adult children. We go by and it's our mom or our dad that's in the cage with the gorilla. What are we going to do? There must be something. Mom, Dad, come out. I mean, there's all these things you do as adult children. Rage is part of it, and anger is part of it. And the new group are the parents and grandparents of alcoholics and addicts. They go by the cage, and they see their granddaughter or their son or... We have to take action. So we get into the cage, and we start vacuuming, and we start sweeping, and we hang pictures of the Pope, and we put up Chinese poetry, and we make nice vegan meals, and none of that helps. None of that helps. What am I going to do? So we get between the gorilla and the person we love, and we try to pull them apart, and the gorilla turns on us and yanks our arms and legs off. The casualty rates, physically, emotionally, psychologically, if you love an alcoholic, is very, very high. You know, what can go wrong? He needs a place to stay. He says he can't afford rent. He said it'll only be for 3 years. What can go wrong? So we have a program too, and it's called Al-Anon. And a lot of the Al-Anon program comes down to stay. Out of the cage. Let's repeat that. Stay out of the cage. But I only want to sweep and vacuum. We know, and it's just madness. We're going to meet over by the giraffes and discuss our desires to vacuum and clean other people's cages. It's not a good policy, even though it seems like such a good idea. And I get that. One of my friends, her son's in the city by San Francisco, and he's there with his girlfriend in an apartment, and my friend was visiting, and the place looked like a tornado had been through it. Of course, these are foolish young people living in the big city, and the kitchen was a train wreck. So she thought, I could clean this up for them as a loving mother. And she called her sponsor first. And the sponsor said, not your kitchen, not your mess. Now, when I hear that, I want to throw up. Because I really want to clean the kitchen. I'd feel powerful and smart and useful and constructive, which is like heroin, you know? So she left the apartment, you know? I think she threw up a little bit on the stairs. How Al-Anon works for families and friends. This, and let me quote Blanche just a couple more times. Then we can take some questions in a few minutes, and then we can all go home. We like controlling the outcome. That's how it's talked about. I'm charming, I'm not charming, I'm helpful, I'm not helpful, I just want the outcome. Like talking to my boss. I mean, I was willing to humiliate myself as long as I got my own way. What's the problem? So Blanche would talk about this, and it's from a Peanuts cartoon, Lucy and Charlie Brown. And Lucy says to Charlie Brown, how many times does 5 go into 3? And Charlie Brown says, 5 doesn't go into 3. And Lucy says, it does if you push. Pushing, we get good at that. Also, you know, those of us outcomes, and we are such compulsive advice givers, some of us such compulsive advice givers. So I met someone on the program, and she came to Al-Anon and noticed that the literature really could be perked up. I mean, you have this and you have that, but you know, clearer directions. And So she wrote her own book, her own hundreds of pages of what to do in every situation because she thinks globally. And she spoke very well at meetings, so she got a following. And these were people who, she was clear and direct and precise and, active. Let's do something. And she did not see that this was her at her craziest because it felt so good. And a few years passed. This is how she tells the story. And the book got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then it was just one page. And then she told me, now I tell people I sponsor only one thing. What? She says, I tell them, honey, call before you shoot. And of course, the alcoholics wonder, well, who are you shooting? Because we don't talk about dark Al-Anon very much, dark Al-Anon, where you have to have 20 years of recovery before they'll let you know that meeting even exists. And then you go to that meeting and you discuss, do you shoot to kill or do you shoot to maim? Because if you shoot to maim, they'll remember you every time they move. And isn't that an intimacy you've been looking for? The rage. I stay away from guns, but I had stuff about shoving people downstairs. That was one of my solutions. There's no marks, virtually no marks. I've seen it done on TV. And so here we talked about this at my very small men's stag. And here's one guy he was so upset about everybody and lots of stairs in his house. And here's his perfect Al-Anon recovery. He has a little sign that just says, tomorrow. The longer version of it is, we said, Chris, you can always shove them down the stairs tomorrow. We don't shove anyone down the stairs today. Okay? Can we agree on that? Okay. Tomorrow. And they think he likes Annie, tomorrow. But no, it's an Al-Anon slogan that I find very helpful. Few more slogans that I find very helpful. I love live and let live. That's revolutionary. Live and let live. I get to live. I get to do things. I get to make mistakes. I get to try stuff out. I get to change my mind. I get to live. And so do others. And it's a great, so much is none of my business. Live and let live. Day at a time. I'll talk about this more tomorrow, but I get a daily reprieve from the worst of my crazy, and I'll talk about some of the crazy tomorrow. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Crucial, advanced recovery. I'd call my sponsor and I was just miserable and hopeless and doomed. 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Awful. I hate everybody. There's no hope. And he'll say, have you eaten today? What does that have to do with anything? Why don't you sandwich with good bread and protein and a glass of milk and then walk around the block and call me in an hour? How humiliating. I'm having a big problem here. And you're buying me off with food. Angry. Angry. I don't always know I'm angry. I just think I'm right. I taught the French Revolution. There was the Committee of Public Safety. And for some people's own good, we had to cut their heads off. We're not angry. Next. We're not angry. Lonely. It's easy to do this. I mean, especially if your circumstances change, like you move somewhere new, you can get very lonely, or someone moves away, or someone dies, or the losses. I mean, all of a sudden there's that loneliness thing. And I spent some time waiting for people to call me. And that can be a pretty awful weekend. So I had to start calling people and saying, let's do something, let's get to a movie, let's have lunch. And you call 10 people and one of them's free. Hooray! One of them's free, but not the cute one. Doesn't matter! You know, the lonely and the tired. When I don't notice I'm tired, I just suddenly notice there is no God. And the polar bears are drowning. And the sun's burning out. How's your day? And I find that when I'm that tired, and that's happened several times over the years, I just don't need a day off. I really need to do something that is recreational and helps me rebuild spirit and that crucial stuff. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Advanced recovery. Wait. W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? It's a good question, especially if it's children. Why are you talking? They haven't listened to you in 5 years. They're not going to start now. Wait. And this one, this has two versions. And I heard this first in Orange County, California, an Al-Anon program concerning family gatherings. Don't take the bait. Because some people just throw raw meat out there, you know. I have had arguments with some people for years over the same stuff. Don't take the bait. And the more serious version of it is don't pick up the grenade. Because that happens too, you know, and you just, oh, let's argue about this one more time. My 1942, 43, in San Jose, California, my family was having its Mother's Day chicken barbecue. A lot of Swedish alcoholics attend this. Andersons, Olsons, Paulsons. And one of the people there, after a couple of beers, criticized Mr. Roosevelt. And my father didn't particularly care for Mr. Roosevelt, but he was a patriot. And at that time, you did not criticize the President of the United States in wartime. Can you imagine that? So long ago. So my father mentioned that to this Swedish relative. You don't criticize. And of course, talked to a drunk, criticized, and the guy just started louder and louder and louder. And then as a result of that, Mother's Day barbecue, 1942 or 3, a whole group of relatives were excommunicated. So I'm born in 1947. And in 1965, the whole family was going to get together again for a gathering for the first time since 1942. And I was 18 years old, and this group of relatives was coming up the driveway. People I'd never met. And my mother turned to me and said, "Act like nothing happened." So I can do that. I mean, that's an instinct for me. Let's pretend nothing's wrong here. Recovery comes along, and there are times when we discuss some things, but not with everybody and not always. We don't have to pick up the grenade. and we don't have to, take the bait about certain things, political stuff, religious stuff, food stuff, relationship stuff. Al-Anon helps me be here and now. It helps me be me as I am, and it helps me participate in a world of recovery as a grown-up, not as an angry 15-year-old or an angry 11-year-old. And I think that's good news. That's a bunch of information. I've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes. I'm done talking. If there's a question or two, I'd be happy to entertain it, or we can just all go home. Okay? What? What should we do? I'll just quietly sit. Oh. Question.
Getting in the way of her finding her Bob. And that's a really, really hard thing to dissect. Because I get it to not go into the gorilla cage, but at the same time, at the end of the day, our daughter, though an alcoholic, is also a human being. And so it's a bit of a bifurcation.
Sure is.
To be able to love the human and exclude the
Yeah, well, I don't have kids, number one. But I've loved some young people, and it's heartbreaking. One of my sisters-in-law is from a Mormon family. Her father was the youngest of 36 children of 6 wives. So they're very interesting family to talk to. And they have a lot of complication. And my sister-in-law, I'll pray for you. We always say that. But what she would do for conundrums is she visualizes God as light, and she holds the person she's concerned about in her hands and just holds them in the light and breathes like 10 breaths. And that when I do that, it takes off some of my anxiety. But a lot of adult life is full of paradoxes. It's full of paradoxes and ambiguity. That's adult real life. It sure is the life of recovery. I hope she lives. I hope she lives. But talk to parents. The ache that's there is understood by other parents. And it's a killer disease. Now it's out there with not just booze, but you mix it up with other things. That magical drug called fentanyl, and I don't know who invented that one, but someone's making a lot of money on that one. This stuff isn't given away for free. So I'd like some people to go to jail. Listen, thanks for being here. If I said anything that's helpful, please use it, and otherwise, don't worry about it. There's Al-Anon saves lives. That keeping my sails out of other people's wind, minding your own business, taking care of yourself. That Al-Anon focus. Oh, here's two more things to end, and these little slogany things that I have. When I'm looking for God's will, I asked my sponsor. My sponsor was not just a sober priest, he was a sober Monsignor, and they're very rare. And he was having a good clear day, and so you want to ask your questions on good clear days. And I said, what's God's will? And he said, it is God's will for each of us to have a life. Go get one. Which means you make decisions and make mistakes, right? That's how God's will is figured out. And when I'm looking at a conundrum, a mess, a mare's nest, I wanted to use that. It means it's very awful and complicated. The questions I ask, what's practical, what's possible, and what's simple. And that's the direction I want to go in. Maybe if that helps with the daughter, what's practical, what's possible, what's simple. And a lot of things I just can't do because it's not possible. This has to be made clear for some Al-Anons. If something's impossible, you don't have to do it. I'll repeat that because it's very subtle. If something's impossible, if you saw Man of La Mancha and you were impressionable, to dream the impossible dream, to fight. It's madness. Don't do that. It's crazy. And then I heard this, and I'll repeat those two things tomorrow, so you don't have to come. But the serenity prayer, the grant me serenity. Because I have to make decisions. Grown-ups make decisions. Al-Anon is all about decisions. I say yes to some stuff. I say no to some stuff. I frequently have to bounce ideas off people because I don't know what's practical, what's possible. So there are things I cannot change. And I want to know what those are. I'm much closer to 80 than 60. So, the clock, she is ticking. And I don't have the energy or the time to waste on things I can't change. And I heard this at a meeting in Texas. Here are 3 things I cannot change. I cannot change the past. I cannot change the truth. And I cannot change you. Like the past. I mean, if you have a religious thing, I'm a church person. We have churches that have been arguing for 2,000 years, 1,000 years, and they're still at it. Madness. I think you could let it go. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Everyone's dead. Let's get here, shall we? But staying in the past, political stuff, we're angry at them because, it's just madness. Can't change the past. Can't change the truth. And pay attention to gravity, use hand railings. Are we almost done? I think we're almost done. Anyway, I can't change the past, can't change the truth, and I can't change you. Loving someone does not change them, it changes me. And hating someone does not change them, it changes me. Right? So what can I change? I can change my thinking, my behavior, and my attitudes, and that's the work of the Al-Anon program and recovery. My thinking, my behavior, and my attitudes. And I can do those things every so often. I remember, I'll do one new thing a day. Oh, man, no, that's exhausting. One new thing every 2 years is really good. Easy does this, easy does this, easy does this. That's all. Go home.
died. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tom. We appreciate you coming tonight. So tomorrow morning, the doors will open at 9 o'clock. We're going to have a potluck breakfast. And unless you have a volunteer position that you're showing up earlier, then the doors will open at 9. If you can please get your garbage on the way out. I think that's it for announcements tonight. Any questions about tomorrow and how tomorrow's going to work? Yeah, breakfast at 9 and then starts at 10. And parking's going to be tight. So we'll probably be a little bigger tomorrow. Yes. Tomorrow, okay, so tonight you didn't check in. Tomorrow, the registration